The billionaire mocked her by saying, "I'll give you 2 million if you speak Arabic." But her response silenced everyone. Emily Thompson held the tray with trembling hands as she walked between the tables of the most expensive restaurant in New York City. Her only concern at that moment was not to drop anything and keep the job that supported her sick grandmother. That's when she reached the table where a man dressed in traditional Arab clothing was sitting, surrounded by 5 other men who were talking loudly and laughing. The man raised his hand asking for the check, and Emily approached with the professional smile she had learned to maintain even on the worst days. "The check, sir," she said, placing the small leather tray on the table. The man looked her up and down, then turned to his friends with a smile that Emily couldn't decipher. He said something in Arabic and they all laughed loudly. Emily felt her face grow warm, but maintained her composure. "Do you understand what I said?" he asked in heavily accented English. "No, sir," replied Emily, still holding the tray. The businessman leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. The other men at the table fell silent, watching the scene with interest. "I'll make you an offer," he said, raising his voice enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "I'll give you $2 million if you can speak Arabic. Real Arabic, not those movie phrases." Emily felt all eyes in the room turn to her. Her heart raced. The entire restaurant had stopped to watch. One of the businessman's friends laughed and said something that sounded like a taunt. Emily tightened her fingers on the tray she still held. "I'm serious," continued the man, taking his wallet out of his pocket and placing it on the table. $2 million. But it has to be fluent. You have to converse with me for 5 minutes without stopping. If you can do it, the money is yours." Emily looked at the manager, who was watching everything from the counter with a worried expression. She knew he wouldn't like this, knew she should just smile and walk away. But $2 million. That would pay for all of Grandmother Margaret's medicine, or the overdue bills, all the years of struggle. "I accept," said Emily, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. The businessman smiled, clearly pleased. He had expected her to run away, embarrassed, not accept the challenge. Emily placed the tray on the table and took a deep breath, and then she began to speak in Arabic. The words flowed from her mouth naturally, as if it were her native language. She talked about the weather, about New York City, about the beauty of Arab culture. Her pronunciation was perfect, her vocabulary extensive. The businessman's eyes widened with each passing second. When Emily finished, after exactly 5 minutes, the silence in the restaurant was absolute. The man sat frozen, looking at her as if he were seeing a ghost. How did you learn?" he asked, now in Arabic. "My grandmother is Lebanese," replied Emily, also in Arabic. "She raised me. It was the first language I learned." The businessman's friends began to laugh, but now it was at him. One of them made a comment in Arabic that made everyone laugh even louder. Emily didn't need to fully understand to know they were mocking their friend for being surprised. The man's face turned red. He stood up abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "Anyone can memorize some phrases," he said, trying to regain his composure. "This proves nothing." Emily felt anger rising, but kept her voice calm. "You said if I spoke Arabic, you'd pay me $2 million. I spoke. I fulfilled my part. You didn't say anything special. Simple phrases. A child speaks better," he retorted, grabbing his wallet from the table and putting it in his pocket. The other men had stopped laughing. Some customers at nearby tables were murmuring among themselves. Emily felt tears burning in her eyes, but she wouldn't cry there, not in front of them. "If you're not going to honor your word, may I at least bring the check?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. The businessman looked around, noticing that everyone in the restaurant was watching, some with disapproving expressions. He motioned for his friends to stand up. "I'm not paying this bill," he said, throwing his napkin on the table. "I don't stay where I'm disrespected." And he left. The other 5 men followed him, one of them glancing at Emily with a pitying look before disappearing through the door. Emily stood there motionless, still holding the unpaid check. The amount was high, over $3,000. The murmuring in the restaurant grew louder. She felt her legs trembling. "Emily!" The manager's voice echoed through the dining room. "In my office. Now." She walked to the back of the restaurant with her head down, feeling the gaze of all the customers and co-workers. When she entered the small, cramped office, The manager, Richard, was already standing, arms crossed, expression stern. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he said before Emily could even speak. "He challenged me, He's Ahmed al-Mansour," Richard interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk. "One of the wealthiest men in the Middle East. He comes here every week, spends fortunes, brings important clients, and you humiliated him in front of everyone." Emily felt the tears finally fall. "He said he'd pay me 2 million if I spoke Arabic. He started it. He wanted to humiliate me first." "And you should have swallowed it," Richard shouted. "It's part of the job. Important clients do what they want, and we smile and thank them. Do you have any idea how much money this man brings to this restaurant?" "He didn't pay the bill," Emily whispered. Richard closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. $3,200, which will come out of your salary. Gradually, of course, because you don't even have that much." "But that will take months. I need that money for my grandmother's medicine." "You should have thought of that before provoking a client." Richard sat back down, opening a drawer and pulling out some papers. "I'm giving you a formal warning. If anything like this happens again, you're fired. Understood?" Emily nodded, unable to speak. She took the paper he handed her, signed without reading it, and left the office. In the hallway, she encountered Vanessa, a co-worker who had always been cold to her. "So it's true that you speak Arabic?" Vanessa asked with a fake smile. "Funny, you never mentioned that before." "It was never relevant." Emily wiped her tears and tried to pass by her. "Or you made it up on the spot to impress." Vanessa blocked her path. "Probably memorized a few phrases and are pretending to be a polyglot, typical of someone who wants attention." "Let me pass, Vanessa. Everyone's talking about it, saying you're stuck up, that you think you're better than others, that you want to show off." Emily pushed Vanessa lightly aside and headed to the locker room. She changed out of her uniform in silence, while other waitresses came and went, casting curious glances her way, but saying nothing. The journey home took 40 minutes by bus. Emily rested her forehead against the cold window, watching the city pass by outside. New York City was chaotic, as always, full of people rushing, honking horns, huge buildings mixing with small houses. When she reached the tiny apartment she shared with her grandmother in the Queens neighborhood, it was past 11 at night. She opened the door slowly, trying not to make noise, but the living room light was on. "I was worried about you," said a hoarse voice in Arabic. Grandma Margaret was sitting in the old armchair, wrapped in a crocheted shawl, her face marked by 82 years of life. Her eyes, however, still shone with sharp intelligence. "I'm so sorry I'm late, Grandma." Emily knelt beside the armchair, resting her head on her grandmother's lap as she had done since childhood. "What happened?" asked Margaret in English, stroking her granddaughter's blonde hair. Emily told her everything. The challenge, the Arabic, the humiliation, the unpaid bill, the warning, Vanessa's malicious comments. When she finished, she was crying again. "He promised 2 million, Grandma. I could have solved everything, the medicines, the bills, everything." Margaret remained silent for a long moment, continuing to stroke her granddaughter's hair. "Powerful men don't like to be surprised," she finally said, "especially in front of other men. You hurt his pride, Habibi, and wounded pride is dangerous." "I only did what he asked, I know." But he didn't expect you to succeed. He wanted to humiliate you, and when he couldn't, he was the one humiliated. Now he'll keep this inside him like a wound that won't heal." Emily lifted her head. "Do you think he'll do something?" "I don't know, but we need to be careful. Men like that have resources we can't even imagine." "I hate that restaurant." Emily stood up, walking to the small window overlooking the building's inner courtyard. "I hate smiling at people who treat me like I'm nothing. I hate pretending everything's okay when it's not." "I know, my dear, but that's life. We do what we need to do to survive." Emily thought about her grandmother's words while preparing tea for both of them. Margaret was right, as always. She had worked her entire life in family homes, cleaning, cooking, taking care of other people's children, while raising Emily alone after her daughter, Emily's mother, abandoned them when the girl was just 3 years old. "Grandma, you never told me how you ended up in the United States," said Emily, bringing 2 steaming cups and sitting on the sofa. Margaret smiled, a sad and distant smile. "I came with your grandfather in 1968. fleeing the war. We had nothing, absolutely nothing, not even proper clothes. The United States was opening its doors to immigrants, and we came without looking back. And Grandpa? Your grandfather worked until his last day. He died when your mother was 15. 1 year later, your mother gave me you and left, but let's not talk about that now. Margaret took a sip of tea. The important thing is that you're strong, Emily. Stronger than you think. What happened today, it will pass. Everything passes. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The next morning, Emily woke up with a headache and a heavy body. She had slept poorly, dreaming of that man laughing at her, with everyone in the restaurant pointing and whispering. She prepared breakfast for her grandmother, organized the medicines at the right times, and left for another day of work. The atmosphere in the restaurant was different. The other waitresses were chatting in small groups and stopped when Emily passed by. Vanessa was at the center of one of these groups, and Emily was sure she was spreading more gossip. Richard called her as soon as she arrived. "Today you'll work in the kitchen," he said without looking her in the eye. "Helping with cleaning." "But I'm a waitress. I've always worked in the dining room." "Not after what happened yesterday. Until things calm down, you stay in the back. And considering you need to pay that bill, you should be happy you still have a job." Emily swallowed her pride and went to the kitchen. She spent the day washing dishes, cleaning pots, sweeping the floor. The work was harder, the heat unbearable, and she earned less because she didn't receive tips. By the end of her shift, her hands were red and burning. This continued for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silent humiliation, of pitying looks from some colleagues and satisfaction from others. Vanessa started spreading that Emily had made up the whole story, that she had probably memorized some Arabic phrases from the internet just to get attention. Some believed it, others didn't, but the rumor spread like wildfire. Emily tried to ignore it, focusing only on doing her work and going home to her grandmother. But with each passing day, she felt a heavier weight in her chest, a sadness that seemed endless. On the 16th night after the incident, Emily was cleaning the kitchen floor when Jessica, one of the senior waitresses, came running in. "Emily! Emily, you need to come!" She was breathless, her eyes wide. "What is it?" "That man, the Arab, he's back. And he's asking for you." Emily's heart stopped. Ahmed Al-Mansour was back and he wanted to speak with her. "Tell Richard I can't leave the kitchen. He put me here, I can't." "He already knows. Richard is nervous. He doesn't know what to do. The man brought even more people today. There must be about 10 men with him, and he's insisting that you serve his table." Emily took off her dirty apron and wiped her hands on her face. There was no time to fix herself up. Her uniform was stained with grease and wash water. Her hair was hastily tied up in a messy bun. "Go," said Jessica, gently pushing her, "before he gets more upset." When Emily entered the dining room, all eyes turned to her. And there he was, Ahmed Al-Mansour, sitting at the main table with 9 other men, all impeccably dressed. He was talking to someone when he saw her and stopped mid-sentence. Emily walked to the table on trembling legs. Richard watched from a distance, anxious. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, keeping her voice steady. "How can I help you?" Ahmed looked at her silently for a long moment. The other men were also silent, watching. Emily felt sweat trickling down her back, and then he spoke, in Arabic. "Ana Asif," he said, standing up. "I'm sorry." Emily blinked, confused. He continued, still in Arabic, his voice softer now, less arrogant. "I offer my formal apologies for my behavior that night. I was having a very difficult business day. I had lost an important contract, but that doesn't justify how I treated you. It was unfair, it was cruel, and it was unworthy of a man of honor." Emily didn't know what to say. The words stuck in her throat. "Besides," he continued, still in Arabic, "I didn't pay the bill, which was dishonest. I've come to correct that." He took out his wallet and placed an amount of money on the table that made Emily's eyes widen. It wasn't $3,000. It was at least 10,000. "This covers the bill from that night and the tips you've missed all these weeks," he said, switching back to English. and I want to apologize in front of everyone who was here that night and witnessed my disrespect." The dining room was absolutely silent. Emily looked around and saw that, yes, many of the same customers from that night were present. Some nodded, acknowledging the man's courage in apologizing publicly. "I accept your apology," Emily finally said in English, "and I thank you for correcting the situation." "Sit with us," said Ahmed, pulling out a chair. "Please, I want to talk with you." Emily looked at Richard, who nodded positively, still in shock. She sat down, her hands sweating. "How did you learn Arabic so fluently?" asked Ahmed, switching back to English so the others at the table could understand. "My grandmother is Lebanese. She raised me. Arabic was the first language I learned. I only started speaking English later." "Does your grandmother still speak Arabic?" "Yes, in fact, she hardly speaks any English. She prefers Arabic." Ahmed exchanged glances with the other men at the table. One of them, older, said something in Arabic that Emily understood perfectly. She would be perfect for the International Relations Department. Emily pretended not to hear, but Ahmed noticed from the sparkle in her eyes that she had understood. He smiled discreetly. "How long have you been working here?" 3 years. "And before?" "Other restaurants. I've always worked in customer service." "Never thought of doing something else? Studying, perhaps?" The question stung. Emily swallowed hard. "I was in college, business administration, but my grandmother got sick and the medications are very expensive. I had to pause my studies to work more." "I understand." Ahmed became thoughtful. "Are you interested in working in translation?" "My company needs someone who speaks Arabic fluently for negotiations and meetings." Emily felt her heart race. "Translation? I've never worked with that professionally." "No experience needed. You need to know the language and understand cultural nuances, and from what I've seen, you understand very well." He took a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. "The salary would be 5 times what you make here. If you're interested, call this number and schedule a more detailed conversation." Emily took the card with trembling hands. 5 times her salary. That would change everything. She could easily pay for her grandmother's medications, go back to studying, maybe even move to a different apartment. I don't know what to say." "No need to answer now. Think it over calmly and call me when you decide. But I need someone urgently, so if you're going to accept, I need to know soon." They had dinner, talking about trivial matters. Ahmed mentioned he was in the United States expanding his business in the import and export sector, especially cultural products between the Middle East and Latin America. Emily listened more than she spoke, still processing everything that was happening. When the evening ended and the men got up to leave, Ahmed said goodbye formally in Arabic, with a slight nod that showed respect. Emily remained seated for a long time after they left, looking at the business card in her hands. Richard approached, his eyes shining with curiosity. "What did he want?" "He offered me a job." "Doing what?" "Translation." Richard let out a dry laugh. "Translation. You, who barely finished high school. He's playing with you, Emily. Rich men do that. They have fun with poor people. They give hope just to take it away later. His card looks real. Of course it's real. He's a billionaire. But I bet when you call, they'll make up some excuse and you'll end up looking like a fool. Forget about it and get back to work." But Emily couldn't forget. That night, on the bus home, she looked at the card at least 20 times. Ahmed Al-Mansour, CEO of Al-Mansour Global Trade. Address on 5th Avenue, corporate and cell phone numbers. When she got home, she showed the card to her grandmother, who frowned. "I don't trust this, Emily," said Margaret in Arabic. "Powerful men always have ulterior motives." "But Grandma, 5 times my salary. We could..." "Could what? Change our lives?" Margaret shook her head. "Nothing changes that fast, Habibi. And when it does, there's always a price. What will he want in return? Maybe he just needs a real translator. Maybe it's a real opportunity. Or maybe it's a trap. You saw how he humiliated you the first time. What guarantees he won't do it again?" Emily had no answer for that. She put the card in her wallet and tried to sleep, but her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. What if it was a trap? What if he was just playing with her? The following days were filled with inner turmoil. Emily went back to work at the salon, but now with a different weight on her chest. Every time she served a table, she thought she could be doing something bigger, something that made a difference, but at the same time she was afraid. Afraid to try and fail. Afraid to leave the security of her current job for a promise that might not come true. It was Vanessa who forced the decision. Emily was in the locker room changing her uniform when she saw her locker open and her things rummaged through. Her heart sank. She frantically searched and realized something was missing. The card. Ahmed's card had disappeared. Looking for this? Vanessa appeared in the doorway, holding the card between her fingers and smiling maliciously. Give that back, Vanessa. I found it on the floor. I thought it was trash. She examined the card with feigned interest. Wow, CEO of an international company. How impressive. And he gave this to you? To you? Give it back. Now. You know, I was thinking. I speak a few languages too. French, Italian, a little English. Who knows? Maybe this Mr. Al-Mansour would prefer someone with more qualifications. Emily felt the anger explode inside her. You don't speak Arabic. So what? I can learn, and at least I have a college degree. I'm not a waitress who barely finished high school and had to drop out of college. Give me back the card, Vanessa. This isn't a joke. Or what? What are you going to do? Vanessa put the card in her pants pocket. Oh, wait, you're not going to do anything, because you never do anything. You just take it, swallow it, and say thank you. Something inside Emily snapped. She lunged at Vanessa, but Jessica appeared out of nowhere, holding her back. It's not worth it, Jessica whispered in her ear. She wants you to lose your job. Don't fall for it. Vanessa laughed and left the locker room, taking the card with her. Emily collapsed onto the bench, her hands on her face. Everything was falling apart again. She's going to call him, Emily said between sobs. She's going to pretend to be me and ruin everything. Let's go to Richard. He won't do anything. You know that. Vanessa is the restaurant owner's niece. She can do whatever she wants. Jessica fell silent because she knew Emily was right. At that moment, Richard entered the locker room. Emily, you have a phone call. Urgent. The man said it's about your grandmother. Emily's blood ran cold. She ran to the office phone, her heart beating so hard it felt like it would jump out of her chest. Hello? Emily? This is St. Joseph's Pharmacy. I'm calling about Mrs. Margaret's medications. You're 3 months behind on payment. We can't release any more without advance payment. But she needs the medication. She'll get sick without them. I know, and I'm sorry. But those are management's orders. $3,200 overdue. If you don't pay, I can't release any more medication. Emily hung up the phone slowly. $3,200. Exactly the amount of the bill that Ahmed hadn't paid that first night. The amount she had been paying off little by little with her salary. The amount that was now missing for her grandmother's medicine. She went home that night unable to think straight. When she arrived, she found her grandmother sitting in the armchair, but there was something different. Margaret was paler, breathing with difficulty. Grandma! Emily knelt beside her, touching her forehead. It was too hot. Do you have a fever? Just a little tired, Habibi. It will pass. We need to go to the hospital. The hospital is expensive. We don't have the money. I don't care. Emily was already grabbing the phone to call a taxi when Margaret held her hand. Emily, listen. Her grandmother's voice was weak. About that card, that man. That? Call him. Grandma, now is not the time. Call. Take this opportunity. I held you back because I was scared, but I was wrong. You need to try. You deserve to try. But Vanessa took the card. She's going to call pretending to be me. Margaret closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Then you go after her and fix this. You're smarter than her, stronger, more determined. Don't let that girl ruin your life. Emily hugged her grandmother, feeling the tears stream down. Margaret was right. She couldn't keep letting people walk all over her. Not anymore. The next morning, Emily woke up determined. She looked up the address for Al-Mansour Global Trade and discovered it was on the 8th floor of one of the most luxurious buildings on Fifth Avenue. She didn't have the card, but she had the address and Ahmed's name. She asked for time off from the restaurant, citing a family emergency, put on her best clothes, a pair of jeans and a simple white blouse, and went there. The building was imposing, all mirrored glass with a lobby that looked more expensive than her entire apartment. "Can I help you?" asked the security guard, looking her up and down with a suspicious expression. "I'm here to speak with Mr. Ahmed Al-Mansour. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but—" "No appointment, no entry." "It's important. He gave me a card, asked me to come here. It's just that I lost the card and—" "Ma'am, a lot of people say that. If you don't have an appointment, I can't let you up. Company rules." Emily took a deep breath, trying to control her frustration. "Then can you call upstairs and let them know that Emily Thompson is here? He'll want to know." The guard sighed, picked up the phone and dialed an extension. He said something quietly that Emily couldn't hear, waited, spoke again. He hung up and turned back to her. "The secretary said he's in a meeting and can't be disturbed. If you'd like to leave a message—" "No, I need to speak with him personally. It's about the translator job he offered me." "If he offered you a job, you should have his contact. If you don't, it probably wasn't a real offer." The security guard crossed his arms. "Now I must ask you to leave. You're blocking the entrance." It was then that Emily heard a familiar voice behind her. "She's blocking the entrance because I asked her to come, but she's late." Emily turned around, and there was Vanessa, dressed in expensive clothes that definitely weren't hers, with heavy makeup and high heels. She smiled at the security guard with false familiarity. "Sorry for the trouble. She's my assistant. A bit disorganized, but it's what we have." Vanessa signaled to Emily, "Come on, they're waiting for us." Emily stood frozen as Vanessa entered the elevator. The door was closing when she finally reacted, running and slipping in just before it shut completely. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Emily hissed as soon as they were alone. Vanessa laughed, checking her makeup in a small hand mirror. "Doing what you didn't have the guts to do. I went to his office yesterday. I introduced myself as Emily Thompson, the waitress who speaks Arabic. Pretended the card number had a typo and asked for the address. Scheduled a meeting for today." "Are you crazy? They'll figure out you don't speak Arabic in 2 seconds. "Oh, about that." Vanessa put away the mirror. "I told them I had a problem with my vocal cords, a temporary inflammation, and that I can't speak Arabic right now, but that I can understand it perfectly. Bought some time until they really test me." "Why are you doing this? You don't even need this job. Your family has money." "Because I can," Vanessa shrugged, "and because you've always been so proper, so proud. I wanted to see your face when you found out I took the chance of a lifetime from you." The elevator door opened on the 8th floor. The office was even more luxurious than Emily had imagined. Marble floors, designer furniture, expensive paintings on the walls. A receptionist smiled at Vanessa. "Good morning, Ms. Thompson. They're waiting in the conference room. Please follow me." Vanessa confidently followed the receptionist, leaving Emily behind. But Emily wasn't going to give up now. She followed her, ignoring the confused looks from the passing employees. The receptionist opened a frosted glass door, and Vanessa entered. Emily came right behind her, making the receptionist stammer in surprise. Inside the room were Ahmed and 3 other men Emily didn't know. They all turned toward the door as they entered. Ahmed looked from Vanessa to Emily, confusion clear on his face. "Mr. Al-Mansour," Vanessa began before Emily could speak, "this is my assist." "I am Emily Thompson," Emily said in Arabic, cutting Vanessa off. "I am Emily Thompson. This woman is an imposter who stole your card from me and is trying to steal this opportunity from me." The silence in the room was absolute. Vanessa turned pale, unsure what to do. Ahmed looked from one to the other, still processing. "Prove it," he said finally, also in Arabic. "If you are who you say you are, prove it now." Emily took a deep breath and began to speak. She told in Arabic about her grandmother Margaret, about how she learned the language, about her childhood, listening to stories from Lebanon, about the dishes her grandmother cooked, about the songs they sang together. She spoke for 5 minutes without stopping, her pronunciation perfect, her vocabulary rich, her emotions transparent in every word. When she finished, Vanessa was nearly crying with anger and humiliation. Ahmed turned to her. "Leave," he said in English, his voice cold as ice, "and be thankful I'm not calling security to remove you by force." Vanessa rushed out, slamming the door. Emily stood there, trembling, still trying to process that she had managed to get this far. "Sit down," Ahmed said, pointing to a chair. "The other gentlemen are Kamal Zafar, my partner, and Tarek Sharif, and Jamal Ibrahim, our business consultants." Emily sat down, feeling the gaze of the three men on her. "Here's what we'll do," Ahmed continued. "We have an actual business meeting now, with Arab investors who will join via video call. You will translate. If you succeed, the job is yours." "Now?" Emily's voice came out higher than she intended. "Now. There's no time for nerves." The video call connected, and three men appeared on the screen, speaking rapid Arabic with an Egyptian accent. Emily recognized the dialect, different from the Lebanese she was used to, but she could understand it perfectly. For an hour she translated a complex negotiation about importing textiles and spices. It wasn't just about translating words, but understanding nuances, business terms, idiomatic expressions. There were moments when she needed to paraphrase so the translation made sense in English, moments when she had to explain cultural contexts that could be misinterpreted. When the meeting ended, Emily was mentally and physically exhausted. Her throat was dry, her hands were sweating, but she had done it. She had succeeded. Ahmed ended the call and leaned back in his chair, observing her. "You're good," he said finally. "Very good. Better than I expected. So, did I pass the test?" Kamal, Ahmed's partner, exchanged looks with the other two men, and then with Ahmed. He said something in Arabic, thinking Emily wouldn't understand. She would be perfect for the expansion in the Middle East. She understands not just the language, but the thinking. Emily pretended not to hear, but Ahmed noticed the slight movement in her eyes. He smiled discreetly, just as he had at the restaurant. "You heard what he said?" It wasn't a question. Emily hesitated but decided to be honest. "Yes, I heard." Ahmed stood up, walking to the window overlooking the entire city of New York City. "There's a problem," he said, still looking out. "My wife manages the company's human resources department, and she has very strict rules about hiring. One of them is that all employees must have a completed college degree." Emily's heart sank. Of course. It was too good to be true. "I was in college," she said, her voice coming out low. "Business administration. But I had to drop out when my grandmother got sick. The medications are very expensive and—" "I understand." Ahmed turned to her. "Believe me, I understand more than you think. But rules are rules, and my wife won't make exceptions." "So there's no job." Emily stood up, feeling the tears threatening to fall, but refusing to cry there. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Al-Mansour." "Wait," he raised his hand. "I didn't say I won't try to change her decision. I just said it will be difficult. Give me a few days to talk to her. Do I have your number?" Emily gave her number, which he wrote down personally on a piece of paper. She left that office feeling a strange mix of hope and despair. She had done well, very well, but still it seemed like the universe was conspiring to keep everything as it was. When she got home that afternoon, she found her grandmother sleeping in the armchair. Margaret had gotten worse. Her breathing was irregular, her skin even paler. Emily touched her forehead and was startled by the high fever. "Grandma, wake up. We need to go to the hospital." "I don't want to go to the hospital," murmured Margaret, barely opening her eyes. "It's not an option, you're very sick." Getting her grandmother out of the house was a battle. Paying for the taxi to the hospital used the last money Emily had. Getting them to see her without adequate health insurance was humiliating, but finally a doctor called them. "Your grandmother has pneumonia," the doctor said after the tests. "Quite advanced. Didn't she take the preventive medications?" "We couldn't afford them. It was too expensive and—" "I understand," the doctor sighed. "Look, she needs to be hospitalized, at least 5 days, and she'll need strong antibiotics, some procedures. The cost will be high." "How much?" "With everything. About $15,000. and that's without complications. Emily felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. $15,000. She didn't even have $15 at that moment. "I don't have that money," she said, her voice breaking. "But I'll get it. Just don't leave my grandmother without care, please. She's all I have." The doctor looked at her with pity and agreed to admit Margaret. Emily stayed there, sitting in the cold hospital hallway, not knowing what to do. She had no one to ask for help, no money, no more options. That's when she remembered Ahmed's card. Not the physical card that Vanessa had stolen, but the number he had written down. He had her number now. She had his number on her caller ID. With trembling hands, Emily called. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Emily? Mr. Al-Mansour, Sorry to bother you, but—" She couldn't continue. The tears she had held back all day finally fell. "What happened?" "My grandmother. She's in the hospital, pneumonia. They said she needs $15,000 for treatment and I don't have it. I have nothing. Sobs interrupted her words. "I know I have no right to ask this, that we barely know each other, but I need an advance for work I don't even know if I'll get, and Which hospital?" "Mercy General Hospital on the south side." "Stay there. Don't leave." He hung up. Emily stared at the phone, not understanding. What did that mean? Was he going to help? Was he sending someone to get her? Or had he hung up because she had crossed all boundaries? 2 hours passed. Emily remained sitting in the same spot, next to the room where Margaret slept under sedation. With each passing minute, hope dwindled a little more, until a nurse approached. "Emily Thompson?" "Yes?" "Come with me, please." Emily followed the nurse to the administrative section. There, a woman was smiling behind the computer. "I've received word that Mrs. Margaret's treatment has been paid in full," the woman said. "An anonymous payment was made half an hour ago." "How? Who?" "I can't disclose that. The payer requested anonymity, but I can assure you your grandmother will receive all necessary treatment at no additional cost to you." Emily collapsed into the chair, unable to process it. Someone had paid, and she knew who. It could only be Ahmed. When she returned to the room, there was a large bouquet of white flowers on the bedside table with a card. Emily picked it up with trembling hands and read. It was written in Arabic, "Al-Aila Muqaddasa, family is sacred." Emily broke down in tears right there, holding her sleeping grandmother's hand. A stranger, a man she barely knew, who had humiliated her weeks ago, had saved the life of the person she loved most in the world. In the following days, while Margaret recovered in the hospital, Emily tried calling Ahmed to thank him, but he was traveling, according to his secretary, so Emily recorded a long voice message in Arabic, reciting a proverb about gratitude that her grandmother always repeated, about how good deeds always return to those who do them, about how she would never forget this kindness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Margaret was discharged after 6 days. She was still weak, but improving. Emily took her home and cared for her with complete dedication, missing work at the restaurant. Richard called on the 3rd day, saying if she didn't return, she'd be fired. Emily replied that she was fired then and hung up. At that moment, she didn't care. She'd find another job, another restaurant, something else. What mattered was that her grandmother was alive and recovering. It was on a Thursday, 1 week after Margaret's discharge, that Ahmed called. "Emily, this is Ahmed Al-Mansour." "Mr. Al-Mansour, I wanted to thank you. No thanks needed. What I did was only right. But that's not the only reason I called. I spoke with my wife about you." Emily's heart raced. "And?" "It was difficult. She's very firm about company rules. She has reasons for that, which perhaps she'll tell you herself one day. But I argued that talent and character matter more than degrees." "And she agreed?" "After much discussion, yes, but with conditions. You'll have a 3-month probation period. If during those 3 months you prove your worth, the position becomes permanent. If you can't, you'll have to leave." "I accept," Emily replied without a second thought. "I accept all conditions." Ahmed laughed on the other end of the line. Great. Can you start Monday? I can start tomorrow. Monday is fine. Arrive at 9 in the morning. And Emily, it's going to be difficult. The other employees know you don't have a complete education. Some will judge you, some will try to sabotage you. You'll need to be strong. I am strong, said Emily, looking at her grandmother sleeping in the armchair. I learned from the best person. On Saturday, Emily used the little money she had to buy appropriate office clothes. They weren't expensive or elegant, but they were clean and professional. She spent Sunday preparing her grandmother, explaining that she'd have a new job, that the hours would be different. I'm proud of you, Habibi, said Margaret, holding her granddaughter's face in her hands. Your grandfather would be too. Monday arrived with clear skies. Emily woke at 5 in the morning, showered, dressed carefully, pulled her hair into a low bun. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman she saw. She was no longer the exhausted waitress from the restaurant. She was someone new, someone with a real chance. The first day was intimidating. The receptionist who had mistaken Vanessa for her now greeted her with professional courtesy. Khalil's secretary Amanda showed her desk, her computer, and explained the systems. She introduced her to the other employees in the international department. Most were polite but distant. Emily noticed the looks and the whispers. One executive in particular, named Christine, was openly hostile. So, you're the waitress, Christine said when they were introduced. Interesting to see we're lowering our standards. Emily swallowed the sharp retort that came to mind and just smiled. Pleased to meet you. The outfit you're wearing, Christine continued, looking Emily up and down. It's from a department store, isn't it? You can tell by the quality. Yes, it is. I paid $50 for it and I'm very happy with it. Emily kept her voice calm. $50? Christine laughed. My blouse cost $1,000. But anyway, to each their own. Amanda interrupted before the situation got worse, taking Emily to see the rest of the office. But the tone was set. Christine would be a problem. Emily's first real task was to translate emails from Arabic partners. It was simple work, but she did it carefully and attentively, making sure every nuance was correct. Ahmed reviewed it personally and nodded in approval. In the second week, she participated in her first video meeting with investors from Qatar. It went well, translating fluently. But when it ended, Christine commented loudly enough for everyone to hear. It's a shame that fluency in languages doesn't make up for a lack of formal education. I bet she doesn't even understand half the business context she's translating. Emily clenched her teeth but didn't respond. Ahmed, however, looked firmly at Christine. Emily understood the context perfectly. She even corrected a mistake you all missed in the numbers presented. If it weren't for her, we would have signed a contract with the wrong figures. Christine's face turned red. Emily hadn't mentioned the mistake to avoid seeming boastful, but Ahmed had noticed it himself. The silence in the room was awkward until the meeting resumed. From that point on, Christine went from hostile to vengeful. She began actively sabotaging Emily's work. She changed meeting times without notice. She forgot to forward important documents. In a crucial meeting, she deliberately mistranslated a phrase to test if Emily would notice. Emily noticed, and she politely corrected it, explaining the subtle difference between the two Arabic expressions that Christine had confused. The correction saved the negotiation, but also made Emily a permanent enemy. You're doing this on purpose, Christine said later, cornering Emily in the hallway. Trying to make me look bad. I'm just doing my job, replied Emily. If that makes you look bad, then maybe the problem isn't with me. You won't last 3 months here. You can be sure of that. But Emily was determined to prove Christine wrong. She worked harder than everyone, arrived earlier, left later. She studied business terms at home, researched the company's partners, and prepared for every meeting as if it were a final exam. Ahmed noticed. He began giving Emily more complex tasks, including her in more important meetings. And she shone. Her ability to understand not just the language, but the culture and Arab thinking, made a real difference in the negotiations. It was in the 7th week that something unexpected happened. Emily was in the office translating a contract when Amanda called her. Emily, there's a lady here at reception asking to speak with Mr. Ahmed. She says she's his grandmother. Emily stood up alarmed. What was Margaret doing there? She was supposed to be at home resting. She rushed to the reception, and there was her grandmother, dressed in her best clothes, her hair done, leaning on her cane. Despite her age and recent illness, there was a dignity in her posture that was impressive. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" "I came to meet the man who saved my life," Margaret replied in English, her voice still carrying an accent. "It's the least I can do, but you should be resting." "I've rested enough. Where is he?" Emily didn't know what to do. She took her grandmother to her desk, offered her water, tried to convince her to go back home. But Margaret was stubborn. She always had been. It was Ahmed who found them. He was leaving a meeting when he saw the two. He stopped, surprised. "Mr. Al-Mansour." Emily stood up. "I'm sorry for the trouble. This is my grandmother, Margaret. She insisted on coming to thank you in person." Ahmed approached, and, to Emily's surprise, spoke in Lebanese Arabic, the same dialect Margaret used. "It's an honor to meet you, Ma'am. Emily talks a lot about you." Margaret's eyes lit up upon hearing her native dialect. She replied in Arabic, her voice gaining strength. "You saved my life, and you gave my granddaughter an opportunity she deserved for a long time. There aren't enough words to thank you." "There's no need for thanks. What I did was only human." "May I speak with you in private?" Margaret asked. "It will only take a few minutes. An old folks' conversation, let's say." Ahmed looked at Emily, who was clearly confused and worried, but he gestured that it was okay. "Of course. Let's go to my office." Emily stood there nervous, not knowing what her grandmother wanted to talk about. 15 minutes passed. 20. Half an hour. She was starting to think about going there when the door opened. Ahmed came out first. His face was different. There was emotion there, held back tears. Margaret came out behind him, also emotional, drying her eyes with a handkerchief. "Grandma?" Emily ran to them. "What happened?" "I'll tell you later, Habibi," said Margaret, hugging her granddaughter. "But first I need to go home. I'm very tired." Ahmed insisted on calling his driver to take Margaret. Emily wanted to go along, but her grandmother refused. "You stay and work. It's your first real job. Don't ruin it because of me." After Margaret left, Emily was restless for the rest of the day. What the hell had happened in that room? Ahmed was also different, more distant, thoughtful. He barely spoke to her for the rest of the day. At night, when she got home, Emily found her grandmother sitting in the armchair with a serene expression on her face. "Grandma, what did you say to him?" Margaret smiled, that mysterious smile she had when she knew something important. "I told a story about the past." "What past?" "Sit here, Habibi. It's a long story." Emily sat on the floor beside the armchair, like she did when she was a child, and listened to her grandmother's stories about Lebanon. "When your grandfather and I arrived in the United States in 1968, we had nothing," Margaret began. "We were refugees. The war had destroyed everything. We came with the clothes on our backs and a lot of hope, but little else." "I know that, Grandma. But what you don't know is what happened in the first few months. We had no place to live. We had no work. We didn't speak English. We slept on the streets for weeks." Emily's eyes widened. Her grandmother had never told her that. "That's when we met a family, an Arab family that was starting a small import business here in New York City. They took us in. They gave us a room in the back of the store where they lived. Your grandfather started working for them in the warehouse, and I took care of the house and their young son." "What family was that?" "Al-Mansour," said Margaret, looking into her granddaughter's eyes. "Khalil Al-Mansour's parents. I took care of him when he was a baby. I was practically his second mother in his early years." Emily was in absolute shock. "What, you knew him? Why did you never tell me?" "Because they moved when Ahmed was 4 years old. They went back to the Middle East because of business. We lost touch completely. I didn't even know they had returned to the United States, that the company had grown so much. I had no idea that the baby I'd rocked to sleep so many times was the same man who saved my life." "And did he know?" "No. He didn't remember me. How could he? He was so small, so... But today, when we talked, when I told him details about his family, about the house they lived in, about the songs I used to sing to him to sleep. He remembered. Not me specifically, but the memories, the feelings. Emily was speechless. Of all the impossible coincidences, this seemed the most impossible. "So that's why," she finally said, "that's why he helped you, helped me. It wasn't random kindness. It was gratitude for what you did for his family." "Perhaps," Margaret stroked her granddaughter's hair, "or maybe it's just the universe balancing things. My parents helped his family when they needed it. Decades later, he helps our family when we need it. It's like that proverb I always taught you. The good you do today comes back to you tomorrow, even if it takes 50 years. Emily hugged her grandmother, crying with emotion. Everything made sense now. Ahmed's insistence on helping, the anonymous hospital payment, the job opportunity despite the rules. The next day, when she arrived at the office, Emily was called to Ahmed's room. When she entered, she found not only him, but also an elegant woman in her 50s, dark hair pulled back in a sophisticated bun, wearing very expensive clothes. "Emily, this is my wife, Jasmine Al-Mansour," said Ahmed. "She's the company's human resources director." Emily felt her stomach tighten. This was the woman who had been reluctant to hire her, the woman with the strict rules. "Nice to meet you," said Emily, trying to keep her voice steady. Jasmine watched her silently for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she smiled. "My husband told me about your grandmother, about our family's past with hers. It's a remarkable story." "Yes, ma'am. He also showed me your work reports from the past few weeks. Impressive. You don't just translate, you understand. That's rare." "I appreciate your words, Mrs. Al-Mansour. Call me Jasmine, and I want you to know that my resistance to hiring you had nothing to do with you personally. I also started without formal training. When I married Ahmed, his family judged me, treated me as inferior. It took me years to prove my worth, and when I did, I promised myself I would never let others suffer the same." Emily didn't expect this confession. Jasmine continued, "But I created such strict rules that I was doing exactly what they did to me, judging people without giving them chances. Your case made me see that, and I'm grateful for it. So my probation period still stands. I won't change the rules for anyone, not even knowing your grandmother's story. If you're good, you'll prove it in 3 months. If not, you'll leave." "Fair." "Fair," agreed Emily, for the first time feeling she was being treated with true equality. "But I want to give you some advice." Jasmine stood up, walking to the window. "Christine will try to bring you down. She's smart, manipulative, and doesn't like competition. Watch out for her." "I've already noticed that, Mrs. Jasmine. And don't let them make you feel inferior for not having a degree. Degrees are important, but they don't define your worth. I learned that after much suffering. Don't make the same mistake." After that conversation, something changed. Jasmine began observing Emily more closely, but not as a threat, as a mentor. She started giving advice, including Emily in strategic meetings, teaching her about the business side of translations. But Christine also noticed the change, and she intensified her campaign against Emily. On a Friday, with 2 weeks left in Emily's probation period, the worst happened. Emily was interpreting a crucial meeting with investors from Kuwait when she realized the documents she had prepared had been altered. The numbers were wrong, the dates switched. If she interpreted that, it would be a disaster. Quickly, she improvised, recalling the correct numbers she had memorized the night before. She managed to save the meeting, but just barely. Afterwards, she investigated and discovered that someone had accessed her computer and changed the files. "It was Christine," said Amanda, the secretary, when Emily approached her. "I saw her at your computer last night after everyone had left. She said you had asked her to retrieve a file." Emily went straight to Ahmed's office, knocking firmly on the door. "Come in." She entered without ceremony and told him everything. Ahmed listened in silence, his face growing more serious with each word. "Do you have proof?" "I have Amanda's testimony and can show the file change history." "Do that. Bring everything to me." An hour later, Emily returned with the evidence. Ahmed analyzed it carefully and then called Christine into the office. He also called Jasmine. "Christine, Did you alter documents on Emily's computer last night? Ahmed asked directly. Of course not. Christine feigned indignation. That's ridiculous. Why would I do that? Emily has evidence, a witness, and change records. So you're calling me a liar? Christine turned to Jasmine. I've worked here for 5 years. I have MBAs from 3 universities, and I'm going to be accused by a waitress who's been here for 2 months. Former waitress, Emily corrected calmly. Now I'm an interpreter, and you tried to sabotage me because you feel threatened. Threatened? By you? Christine laughed, but the laughter sounded false. You're no competition for me. Then why did you try to bring me down? The silence that followed was tense. Jasmine looked at Christine with an icy expression. Christine, this is harassment and sabotage. We have 0 tolerance for this behavior. You're fired. Immediately. What? Christine turned pale. You can't fire me. I'll sue. Go ahead, said Ahmed, his voice cold. We have all the necessary evidence and witnesses. Security will accompany you to collect your things. Christine stormed out of the room, slamming the door. Emily stood there, still processing what had happened. Ahmed and Jasmine exchanged looks. Your probation period ends in 2 weeks, said Jasmine. But after what just happened, I think we've already made our decision. Emily's heart raced. The position is yours, permanent, with a raise, Ahmed smiled. And it's not just because you saved that meeting today. It's because you demonstrated integrity, competence, and strength of character. Exactly what we're looking for. Emily covered her face with her hands, crying with relief and joy. She had made it. She really had made it. Furthermore, Jasmine continued, we're creating a new position, Director of Cultural Relations, someone who doesn't just interpret, but understands and teaches about the cultures we work with. We want you to take it. Director? Emily could hardly believe it. But I haven't even finished college. Then finish, said Ahmed. The company will pay. We're creating a scholarship program for employees who want to continue their education. You'll be the first to benefit. Emily didn't know what to say. Everything was changing so fast. From the humiliated waitress in a restaurant to director of an international company, from struggling to pay for medicine to being able to study again. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The following months were a complete transformation. Emily Thompson took on the role of director, started night classes at college, moved with her grandmother to a larger and more comfortable apartment. She enrolled Margaret in a social group for elderly Arabs, where her grandmother finally found people to converse with in her native language. The company prospered with the negotiations Emily conducted. She not only translated, but understood the cultural subtleties that made the difference between a closed deal and a lost one. Her reputation grew, and soon other companies began seeking her for consultations. Ahmed became more than a boss. He became a friend, almost an older brother. He and Jasmine regularly had dinner with Emily and Margaret, exchanging stories, laughing, strengthening the bonds that fate had created between their families. 1 year after the incident at the restaurant, the company held a large year-end celebration. All employees, partners, and clients were invited. Emily was nervous because Ahmed had asked her to give a speech. When it was her turn to speak, Emily stepped onto the stage wearing an elegant royal blue dress that Jasmine had helped her choose. She looked at the crowded audience and saw familiar and new faces. She saw Jessica, her former colleague from the restaurant whom she had helped get a job at the company. She saw her grandmother Margaret in the front row, smiling proudly, and she began to speak, in Arabic first, then in English. "A year ago," she said, her voice firm and clear, "I was a waitress at a luxury restaurant. I worked hard, always smiled and thought that would be my place forever, until a man publicly challenged me, hoping to humiliate me. But that moment of humiliation turned into the greatest opportunity of my life." She looked at Ahmed, who was standing next to Jasmine, smiling. "It wasn't an easy path. I faced prejudice, sabotage, moments when I wanted to give up. But I learned that strength doesn't come from never falling. It comes from always getting back up." Emily continued, speaking about overcoming, about second chances, about how a gesture of kindness can change entire lives. She spoke about her grandmother, about sacrifice, about the gratitude she felt for every person who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. "My grandmother always taught me a proverb," she said, switching back to Arabic for this part. "The good you plant today, you reap tomorrow. Maybe it's not you who reaps, maybe it's your daughter or your granddaughter or a stranger you helped without knowing. But good always comes back, always." When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Emily saw tears in the eyes of many present. She saw her grandmother drying her eyes with a handkerchief, and she felt that finally she was exactly where she was meant to be. After the speech, as people mingled, talking and celebrating, Ahmed stepped back onto the stage and asked for attention. "Before we end tonight," he said, "I want to make one last announcement. Emily spoke about the good that returns, about how we help each other, and I want to honor that publicly." He gestured for Margaret to join him on stage. Emily's grandmother walked up slowly, leaning on her cane, but with unwavering dignity. "This lady," said Ahmed, his voice choked, "took care of me when I was just a baby. My family was fleeing the war, arrived in the United States with nothing, and her family took us in, gave us work, gave us hope. Without her and her husband, I wouldn't be here today." The hall fell into absolute silence. Decades later, not knowing who her granddaughter was, I treated her poorly. I tried to humiliate her. But fate has mysterious ways of teaching us, of showing us that we are all connected, that nothing we do is isolated. Every action has consequences that echo through time. He turned to Margaret, and in front of everyone, bowed in deep respect. "Shukran. Ummi. Thank you, Mother, for taking care of me when I couldn't take care of myself. For planting the seed of kindness that blossomed into this story." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Emily Thompson stepped onto the stage as well, embracing her grandmother and Ahmed Al-Mansour at the same time. It was the closing of a circle that had begun over 50 years earlier, in a time of war and despair, and ended there in a moment of celebration and gratitude. In the days and months that followed, the story of Emily and Ahmed spread. Newspapers published articles, TV shows interviewed them. But for Emily, the real story wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about family, about kindness that spans generations, about not giving up even when all seems lost. She continued working hard, finishing her college degree with honors. She expanded the scholarship program at the company, helping other employees achieve their educational dreams. She created workshops on cultural sensitivity, training companies on how to do business while respecting differences. Margaret lived to see all of this. She lived to see her granddaughter not only survive but thrive. She lived to see the cycle of kindness that she and her husband had started come to such a beautiful completion. And on quiet evenings, when Emily returned home after a long day of work, she would still find her grandmother in the armchair waiting to hear about her day. They would talk in Arabic, as they always had, sharing stories, laughing about little things, grateful for the present they had. Because in the end, Emily realized that the greatest wealth wasn't in the millions that Ahmed had offered that first night. It was in the connections we make, in the people we love, in the kindness we spread throughout the world, without expecting anything in return. The journey from a waitress to an executive wasn't just about professional advancement. It was about dignity regained, about deserved pride, about proving to herself that where we come from does not define where we can go. And every time Emily passed by a restaurant and saw waitresses working hard, serving tables with tired smiles, she remembered where she came from. And when she could, she left generous tips, not as charity, but as recognition, as a way of saying, "I see you, I know how hard it is. And you are more than this. You can be more than this. Because if she could do it, anyone can. All it takes is an opportunity, someone who believes, and the courage not to give up when everything seems impossible." And so the story that began with humiliation and challenge ended with triumph and gratitude. The circle was closed, the heart's accounts were balanced, and two families that fate had separated were reunited in the most unlikely way possible. proving that sometimes the best stories aren't the ones we invent. They are the ones life writes for us, surprising us with twists that no screenwriter would dare to create. End of story. And you? What did you think of this story? Can you imagine going through a situation like that? Did Emily make the right decisions? Would you have her courage to face all those difficulties? Tell us in the comments what you felt and what you would do in her place. Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one. Your participation is very important.